Mr. President, I want to commend the Senate for discussing what is the most important issue confronting the United States of America today, and that's energy, its contribution to the environment, its cost, its availability, its future, and its impact on the economy. And I rise today to thank a number of people who've contributed to the body of knowledge I want to try and recite as best I can today. Michael Coelho, Carolyn McLean, and Duncan Hill of my staff, Andy Caputo of the staff of EPW, and three individuals back in Georgia, two alive today, one unfortunately who's deceased. Carl Knobloch, a distinguished man of our state of Georgia, who is probably the most ardent advocate for open and green space and the preservation of our environment of anyone I know. Mr. Chris Sawyer, who is a distinguished lawyer that represents many naturalist organizations and many conservation organizations. And Mr. Bob Shearer. Bob passed away last year, but in the 1970s, he had led the Georgia Power Company during the time that it built the Plant Vogtle, a nuclear energy plant in Georgia that today provides affordable, reasonable, reliable, and inexpensive energy without emitting any carbon into the atmosphere. Mr. President, I couldn't agree more with Senator Feinstein's remark about it is time for us to put all of the issues and all of the solutions on the table. It is time for us to talk about everything we need to do to improve our environment, make energy more affordable, and protect our economy. It is ironic, I think, that the legislation that will be before us is a piece of legislation that leaves out two subjects that are critical to being able to accomplish what the bill portends. First, it basically leaves out any provisions for nuclear energy or the expansion of the generation of electricity through nuclear power. Second, it gives no attention to the single way that we know to sequester carbon today. It talks about carbon sequestration in a prospective way, but doesn't talk about the single way we sequester carbon today, which happens to be through Mother Nature. So for just a second, I want to talk about nuclear power, and I want to talk about conservation and open and green space. Both are included in two amendments that at some point in time in the debate, I hope to be able to offer. First, nuclear. And Senator Warner was kind enough to share with me an amendment that he plans to offer on nuclear, which is a recitation of a number of facts that, ironically, I'm going to recite in my remarks. And I commend him for doing. The most important of which is today in America, 73% of the non-carbon emitting energy generated in this country is generated by nuclear. And that 73% saves 700 million metric tons a year of carbon going into the atmosphere. Now, you would think if you already know that you're saving 700 million cubic tons of carbon going into the atmosphere, and if you know 73% of your non-carbon emitting energy is coming from nuclear, it would seem that if you want to reduce carbon emissions and carbon in the atmosphere, you would empower nuclear energy. And I think we should do that. Because regardless of your philosophy on global warming and climate change, carbon is making a difference, and it's in our geopolitical interest, and it's in our environment's interest to reduce carbon. Geopolitically, because we buy less from Chavez, Ahmadinejad, and Putin, where we get a majority of our oil today. That's the geopolitical issue, and that's good for us to do. Environmentally, they're not exactly sure at Greenland what all is happening, but they are sure the carbon isotopes in the ice borings are much higher today than they were 30 years ago, and that's the one change. So it's important to reduce carbon. But to leave out the single way we know to do it best, to leave out empowerment of nuclear energy, to talk about it only in terms of reference and not in terms of action, is to me disappointing. The amendment that I'll offer, which I offered in committee, does a number of things. First of all, it provides incentives for nuclear energy in terms of a 10% investment tax credit for the production of a new nuclear power plant. By the way, solar tax credits today are 30%. This is 1/3 of the tax credit for solar, but 10% is a good incentive, and these plants are huge investments. That's number one. Second is accelerated depreciation or recovery of the investment over 5 years, and that's appropriate. And third is loan guarantees and standby help for an industry that in the 1970s, when government stalled it and investment dollars went away, absolutely almost went bankrupt trying to continue to build the plants that today emit carbon-free energy in the United States of America. Those three provisions, the standby loan guarantee, the investment tax credit of 10%, and the 30% in terms of depreciation, and the 5-year depreciation recovery, make perfectly good sense, incentivize nuclear, and reduce the emission of carbon into the atmosphere. I have a chart, put that chart up. It's very interesting on this subsidies, by the way. There are a lot of anti-nuclear people that talk about how the government should not subsidize nuclear. Well, we subsidize almost every form of energy. Today in America, $24.34 of every megawatt hour produced on solar is a tax incentive, a federal subsidy. On wind, $23.37 is a federal subsidy on every megawatt hour. Nuclear is $1.59. That's the level of subsidy. 10 times, or really 12 times, the nuclear subsidy is what you pay for solar and wind, which give you 27% of your carbon-free electric energy, while nuclear gives you 73%. The bill also deals with empowering the workforce. You know, when we evacuated nuclear energy generation in the 1970s, something else evacuated in America, and that's the construction of nuclear equipment, and that's all the employees that the industry you would need in a revitalized industry. So we focus on that and talk about trying to bring that back to the United States of America and empowering our workforce so we can build safe, reliable nuclear energy plants in the 21st century. I have a number of quotes that I'd like to just put that on top of that one. The following members in public debate, when we debated this nuclear amendment in the EPW committee, Senator Lautenberg, Senator Baucus, Senator Cardin, Senator Carper, Senator Warner, Senator Lieberman, all made comments endorsing and embracing the fact that nuclear is a part of the solution. Mr. President, I would ask today, if it is a part of the solution, why is it not a part of the Lieberman-Warner climate change bill? Now, conservation for just a second. Carbon sequestration is something we need to perfect, and we don't know how to do it yet. We think we can find some caverns in the earth and we can sequester it there, but we're not quite sure, and the technology's not there yet, or is the cost. But we hope we can do it. But Mother Nature has been sequestering carbon for all time, because that's the way our balance in our environment works. That's one of the issues. So I have an amendment to propose here that's a conservation easement tax credit amendment to incentivize the United States of America over the next 5 years through $25 billion in refundable tax credits to generate a fund to buy conservation easements in open and green space throughout the United States of America. Since the founding of our country, 15% of our forest and open space and green space is gone forever to an impervious surface known as urban development. If that continues, then our own natural carbon sequestration system will be broken. So it's important, while we still have the open and green space, while we know where our wetlands are, where our rivers and waterways are, where our important ecosystem lands are, that we create a mechanism for those lands to be protected, but not one where the government goes and buys it. It costs you a lot of money to buy all this land. Instead, a program where you create where you create refundable tax credits, very much like the low and moderate income housing tax credits, $5 billion a year for 5 years, to be sold in the market to raise the money, which you in turn allow 501c qualified organizations like the Trust for Public Land, the Conservancy, etc., the capital to go out and, according to a statewide plan, buy conservation easements to forever protect in perpetuity those critical areas to our ecosystem and our country and, in fact, our environment. It would seem like to me that when you debate the most topical issue of the day, the most controversial issue of the day, the thing that everybody wants to talk about, that if you know there's only one way to sequester carbon, and that's through the natural process of nature, and protecting open and green space does that, and you know the only major supplier of carbon-free energy is nuclear, that you make an investment in this act by seeing to it that you empower the future of this country to focus on conservation and nuclear and all the other sources available. I'm a Republican. I'm not one that likes to throw partisanship out in any debate. I think you ought to win something on merits. But I think we in our party and the Democrats in their party need to look at this issue in a different perspective. A lot of us have our biases. It's time to put our biases aside. If there is a known solution out there where we can reduce carbon, expand our energy availability, and reduce costs, we ought to embrace it. Nothing should be off the table. Solar shouldn't, wind shouldn't, nuclear shouldn't, renewables shouldn't, biodiesel shouldn't. Whatever it is, synthetic fuels, we should act now, and we should act boldly to see to it that while we work for the best interest of our environment, we work for the best interest of our citizens. Our citizens today are paying more for gas and energy than they ever paid before, and there's no end in sight. We have a debate today that if this bill passed in its form would raise that cost even more, by some estimates by 2050, $1.50 a gallon more. You're talking about serious business here. We need to be serious as members of the Senate, as members of the most deliberative body in the world, and make sure that every option is on the table. And for this senator, that means expanding conservation easements for better sequestration of carbon naturally, and it means by re-empowering the nuclear energy business to see to it that the one source of reliable, safe, carbonless energy that we know today in the United States of America is empowered for the 21st century. Mr. President, I yield back the balance of my time.
Senator from Virginia.